Hi everyone, you might be wondering why I would call the Xiaomi 11T Pro boring. Well, kind of because there isn't much to say about it. I think the phone does a lot of things well for the price that you are paying for it, especially having 120 watt charging that charges your phone up to 100% in 17 minutes. That's kind of mental, honestly. Of course, I don't know what this means for the longevity of the battery, but it's really insane that you can charge your phone up in 17 minutes, when phones in the past with a far smaller battery easily could take 1-2 hours, something like that. And this one, 17 minutes for this kind of battery size. Either way, the Mi 11T Pro is a solid phone, but there are some things that I've noticed while using the device. So let's start this review about the Xiaomi 11T Pro. And yes, the Mi missing in the name itself is still weird to me. Either way, let's jump into it. So, straight from the get-go, something that I find a little bit boring about the Xiaomi Mi 11. See, now here I did it again. I called it the Mi. The 11T is basically the design. I know what they're trying to do with the back and having that texture brush kind of look on it, but I don't find it really appealing. Not to mention that the camera itself also doesn't necessarily look appealing. I think the Poco F3 did a better job. It made this look more distinguished and it made it look better. Maybe in white this one would work better, but with this color it does feel a bit boring. Not to mention with this color, fingerprints, they're all over the place and it makes it terrible to shoot with. But apart from that, I think it's a solid device. The audio, for instance, when playing music is really solid. Also, call quality is really good on this phone as well. I really don't have any issues when it comes to the basics of this phone. Software experience, it's either a hit or miss. The Xiaomi skin itself for me isn't necessarily the greatest out there. I think there's still a lot of work to do with the skin itself, but from day-to-day base I find that it works well enough. The weird thing that I still have to get used to for some reason is on the right side, if you swipe down on the top of the display, you actually get all the bars, so you can have your flashlight, your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth and all that. But if you swipe it on the left side, it just gets the notifications and all that. I find that a bit odd because I'm so used to just swiping down and getting notifications, and then on top you will have your icons for anything that you wish to set up. For me that's a bit weird. But then again, it also makes a little bit more sense, because if you do want to quickly toggle between the things that you normally use, like flashlight, it's faster. You don't need to swipe down twice. It's just one swipe down and you actually have those icons there that you want to change. But for me, I still don't find it the best way to work around with it, but that's an opinion for me. When it comes to the display itself, actually here again it performs pretty solid. I don't think this is necessarily the best display out there. Again, here it's a little bit boring because there isn't much to mention about the display itself. It gets bright enough, it gets dim enough, it does have quite a good amount of color in it as well. And you know, the 120 Hz refresh rate, again here is solid. Again though, it does make it a little bit boring, as I said in the title. The Xiaomi 11T Pro, as stated, doesn't have much that I can discuss about it, because a lot of things, as stated, is pretty solid. But one thing that I truly care about is of course having features on my phone. For instance, having a headphone jack, sadly that's not included. Having a micro SD, sadly that is not included. And if you are a person like me that really wants that, well, I have to say sorry, but this just doesn't have it. It's good though, however, to see that you actually do get the charger inside of the box itself. The 120 watt. And yes, I've tested it, and at 17 minutes, yeah, that seems pretty accurate. I don't call it being perfectly on a minute, but it's about 17 minutes. So it's great to see that you actually get that option and that you get it inside the box. Right, Apple and Samsung and Google at the moment as well. Yeah, having a charger inside of the box simply makes sense, especially when it comes to a feature like having a faster charger inside. Like for instance the Samsung Galaxy S22, according to Ice Universe, or the Ultra version, will have 45 watt charging, something like that from what I remember. But you won't get the charger inside of the box, which means if you want to utilize that, you need to buy the charger separately. That then comes in a separate box that needs to be shipped again, and then yeah, definitely environment there. Either way, I think it's really good to see that you actually get the charger inside, and I find it weird that that now is a positive point about the products. Either way, let's jump into something that I care a lot about, and yeah, it's the camera. The Xiaomi 11T Pro of course comes with the 108 megapixel camera inside, but sadly also an 8 megapixel wide lens. I don't feel like there's much use to that. That 8 megapixel wide lens, for instance, does limit it in terms of video recording. With the main lens you can record up to 8K in 30 frames per second. Granted, 8K recording on a phone for me has never been interesting. The quality of it just isn't that good. I'd rather record in 4K and 30 frames or 60 frames per second than having an 8K footage that is not pretty stable and just not that great to begin with. For me, it just doesn't make sense. Hopefully with 1/8 sensors becoming a normal, who knows, maybe it becomes better and having proper stability inside. We'll have to wait and see, but for me, having an 8 megapixel sensor for the ultra wide and not being able to record of course at the same level as the main lens just feels a bit odd. Especially when you want to do something with the cinematography. This is something that they like to hype with this phone, and I think that's cool and all, but if you are limiting the 8 megapixel to just record at 1080p, it just doesn't make as much sense for me. And that's not because of course, Xiaomi saying, yeah, we're not gonna allow you, but it's only an 8 megapixel sensor and it just doesn't allow it to be recorded in that resolution. The camera just isn't good enough for that. And I think in terms of camera, there's something that we have to discuss about as well. Normally I think Xiaomi does it really well. Their color profiles are really solid and they are going for normally a more natural profile. With the Xiaomi 11T Pro, I think they've done it a little bit overboard. They make it too cool, too little of color. There isn't much going on. They made it too natural, almost like you are recording with a flat profile. It has that kind of feeling where it just takes life out of almost everything in some images. Of course, granted, it's not with everything, but sometimes it does look with the images itself that a lot of color has been removed and it goes for the too natural. That makes no sense, but it basically removes colors that you would normally see in real life. It makes it a little bit too much. Granted, as stated, it's not with every shot. But when it doesn't have that issue, it actually can create some amazing shots as well. I think with the main camera, when it doesn't do this flat profile kind of look, it actually is quite solid here.
To focus in the corner of my best friend's sofa, you were getting buzzed on rum and cola. Wasn't brave enough yet just to talk to you. Not a smooth talker under pressure. Sweaty palms ain't making it much better. Something about you feels so special. Prettier from the minute that I met you.
And then of course we have to talk about speed and the Snapdragon 888 inside. There's a lot of talk about phones heating up with the Snapdragon 888 inside. For me, I do tend to notice sometimes having a little bit more heat coming from the phone. Not something that is bothering me, but it does tend to get that little bit hotter. Just not to the extreme. From what I've heard from tech tablets, the 11T does seem to have that problem. So I would definitely recommend checking out his video about it. And of course, if you aren't subscribed to his channel, don't forget to do so, because he does really make solid videos. And if you want to go more in depth when it comes to reviews, definitely Tech Tablets is one of the best out there, together with Zone of Tech, of course. Both of their links in the description. So for me, I don't really have any heat issues, but again, it does tend to get that a little bit hotter than some other phones I've tested. When it comes to performance, again, here the phone is really solid. It blazes through everything, and really I don't really have a struggle, but honestly that's not a surprise anymore. Phones these days have become so fast and so solid in terms of usage, especially for day-to-day life, that I don't see a phone performing that bad anymore. Especially if you have a phone with the Snapdragon 888 inside. Of course, if you do get a phone from Wish with an unknown chip inside, yeah, definitely you would still have that issue. But with phones like this, you really don't have that issue anymore. So for me, the Xiaomi 11T Pro is a really solid phone. Out of the point system that I'm gonna use from now on, it will get 403 points out of 550. Now I will explain the point system a little bit. For everyone there's a preference when it comes to the phone. For instance, for me, camera is one of the most important parts. Features is also really important to me. For instance, having a headphone jack or a micro SD and a charger inside of the box. Those kind of things I feel like fall under features. The Xiaomi 11T Pro of course scores a 403 out of 550. Now how does this scoring system work? Well, simply put, the most important part for me, so for instance camera, matters most to me. So something like for instance a fun factor doesn't matter as much to me. That shouldn't get the same score weight as something like the camera. So what I did is basically have 10 categories that I find important or think could be important to someone else as well, and just give my opinion about it. The camera for instance being on the top spot. That I truly care for. Features for instance the second spot. What the camera gets is a times 10. The next one times 9, times 8, times 7 and so on. So I go through that list and then I get a score out of it that makes it clear for me where it really lands, and honestly it comes really close to what I'm feeling. For instance, the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra is one of my favorite phones of 2021. But one other phone that I bought in 2021 is the Sony Xperia 5 Mark II. And between them I keep hustling like, ooh, which one would I prefer to use? And here the Sony actually wins. And in my mind as well, because the headphone jack is really handy to have. The micro SD is really handy to have. So those things really matter to me as well. And the camera in terms of performance, they both have something to speak about that I find important when it comes to a phone. So here the Mi 11T wins 403 points out of 550 for phones below 700 but above 400, because of course all have an own category. So this is like the mid-range high-end version, and the Mi 11T falls under that. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video and of course the review of it, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and of course leave a comment below, because it does truly help out a video. Either way, hope you enjoyed, and of course talk to you guys in the next.